Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 20th of May, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So we had Mainnet Shadow Fork number 5 happen, I believe yesterday, or I guess yesterday would be for most of you now, and apparently it went exceedingly well according to Danny Ryan here. I didn't see many details of it publicly posted to Twitter, but I checked out the ETH kind of like R&D Discord channel, and everything seemed to have gone through really well. So this, as I said, is the 5th Mainnet Shadow Fork. I can't remember if we're gonna have like 6 before or after the Ropsten testnet merge, or if we're even going to do a 6. I'm sure they will do another one, but I haven't come across that yet. Probably I've just missed it. I've been a little bit busy today, but yeah, it's great to see this. Great to see that they just seem to be going through kind of like as they should, right? There's kind of like no major bugs or major issues. It just seems like every time we do it now, it's fine. Now, obviously, the big test is still going to be Ropsten on coming on June 8th there, and if that goes all well and good, we'll obviously move on to the other test nets and then onto mainnet, right? You guys know the story here. And speaking of kind of like I guess mainnet and mainnet merge and dates around that, there was a panel at Permissionless, I believe, yesterday, where Preston Van Loon and kind of like Justin Drake were on the panel here. I don't recognize the person on the far right, so sorry to that person if I don't recognize them. But Justin Drake basically said that the Ethereum merge may happen as early as August. Now, obviously, Daily Gwei listeners and watchers will know that I've been saying August for a few weeks now. I think I've been putting like percentages on it based on kind of like what I'm following and things like that. And the fun thing is, David asked Justin, he was on this kind of like panel, he was like, has this been articulated anywhere else? Has anyone else said August? And Justin's like, I think Anthony Sassano figured it out. So maybe I did. Maybe it get pushed to September. I still told you guys that I think there's like a chance it'll still get pushed to September, depending on kind of like any kind of like bugs that push it back on the test nets, on the public test nets or anything like that. But also we have that difficulty bomb to worry about. So I feel like August is definitely what they all want to happen, or all of them being kind of like the core devs and researchers. But if the public test nets, if there's any major bug on a public test net, I think we could. So major bug, I mean like a critical bug, right? If there's any critical bug on a public testnet, then I'm pretty sure the core devs would vote to delay the difficulty bomb, which would then delay the merge. I could even see it being delayed, well, not delayed, but like pushed back to as kind of like as far back as October, depending on kind of like what they do with the difficulty bomb. Because if we leave the difficulty bomb active until late September, it would make the chain not unusable, but like very congested, very slow, for more so than I guess like it is normally, for like 6 weeks or something. And that's a long time. Like I argued the other day that 2 weeks was okay, but 6 weeks starts getting into like really, really long. I mean, 6 weeks in crypto is an eternity, right? And it depends like what the market's doing at that point. Like, is the market hot again? And that would affect things. So I think August, like, I'm if nothing goes wrong with the public test nets, I'm happy to put like a near 100% certainty on an August merge, right? Maybe it happens on September 1st just to spite me. I don't know, but like I'm pretty confident in August there. But anyway, enough about kind of like merge dates. There's just one last thing on the merge here from Trent Van Epps, who kind of like shared there's a merge community call number 4 happening on Friday, June 3rd. These calls is going to go over the testnet upgrades, client releases, and information for validators and infrastructure. One thing that I wanted to remind you solo stakers out there. So solo stakers being the people that are staking with 32 ETH using their own hardware, having their own validators. If you are currently outsourcing your kind of execution layer, aka an ETH1 node, to a third-party provider, you're not going to be able to do that post-merge. So you're going to need to run your own execution layer client, whether it be Geth, Nethermind, Aragon, or Besu, and you need to be doing that, at the kind of like time of the merge. So probably best to get that synced up now. You can do kind of like a snap sync or like a fast sync. It won't take too long. And make sure you've got like the storage space for it, of course, and then just kind of like connect your beacon node to that kind of like local node, because if you don't post merge, I don't think it can lead to slashing or anything like that, but I think it just basically makes your. I actually don't know what it could lead to. I don't want to say anything and be wrong about this, but I believe that it can lead to some negative things for you, whether that be slashing or whether that be kind of like missing attestations or things like that. I've got to check on that one, but post merge you won't be able to use third party providers from my understanding, so you have to use your own local execution layer client. So I just wanted to kind of like put that heads up out there. But if you want more information on that, you can basically join this community call, which I'm sure they're going to cover this on, or you can kind of like go, I think to the Ethereum.org website, I think has some information about this as well. But as I said, just run your own. I mean, generally, if you're like a solo staker, you should be running your own kind of like nodes anyway. I mean, if you want that fully kind of like self-sovereign, decentralized experience, you should be running your own, both consensus layer clients and nodes, and also your execution layer node as well. All right, so Danny Ryan put out the 35th Finalized blog post today discussing the ETH Staker CLR fund, which I've talked about. That's that kind of like public goods funding round, and the data availability sampling RFP. So I discussed that yesterday, I believe, on the refuel as well. So I'm not going to go through them again, but I mean, it's here. This is kind of like just another quick update from Danny Ryan here with some relevant links as well. So definitely go check this out if you haven't yet. All right, so Sajz, I don't know how to say the name here, Sajz or Z or something. Man, you guys know that I am so terrible with pronouncing anything. But anyway, this person who is the product manager for Besu basically has shared a tweet today saying that the Bonzai kind of like storage improvement upgrade is not experimental anymore, which is and what Bonzai is basically improving storage for things like full nodes and archive nodes. So you can see here that the storage improvements on Bonzai are pretty radical. I mean, you can see here the full archival node with Bonzai is only taking up, I think, about just eyeing it here, maybe like 1.1 or 1.2 terabytes of space, as opposed to a full archival normal kind of like, I guess, like node here called Forest, which takes up almost 12.5 terabytes. So massive improvement here, which is very, very cool. And you can try it now with Besu. So you can have a full archival node, which is different to a full node. I mean, generally, like, no one really needs to run a full archival node in terms of like just everyday kind of like people, but it's good for kind of like infrastructure providers and things like that. And obviously making it easier to run a full archival node is always beneficial. So if you want to run one, you can now do it a lot easier by using Besu's kind of like Bonzai upgrade, which is really, really cool to see. All right, so I wanted to kind of like focus on this, I guess, tweet that Vitalik put out, Preston Van Loon replied to, and then Ali Attia kind of like put together a kind of like caption here. But Vitalik basically said, the Prylabs team honestly deserves a lot of praise for taking a year-long don't use Prysm campaign on the chin and not opposing or getting publicly upset by it. Anyway, that battle is basically won now. Time to switch focus to getting more diversity in execution clients. And Vitalik's obviously talking about client diversity here, and it's something that I've talked about a lot on the refuel before, so you guys should know what that is by now. And then Preston Van Loon from Prylabs kind of replied here and said, thanks. It wasn't easy to hear at first, but it's super important and the best for the Ethereum network as a whole. We're thrilled to see Prysm under 50% again. And then Ali says, Ethereans are built different. I mean, this is... like, I think I've explained this a bunch of times to all of you, but this is really the key of what keeps me in the Ethereum ecosystem. It's got nothing to do with... I mean, it's got some stuff to do with the other things, but like... if it wasn't for this sort of stuff, if it wasn't for the community, if it wasn't for this sort of ethos within Ethereum, I strongly believe that I wouldn't be involved with Ethereum anymore. It doesn't matter how bullish I am on ETH as an asset. It doesn't matter how excited I am for things like Layer 2s or DeFi or anything else built on Ethereum. If it wasn't for like this community ethos that we have, where literally one of the kind of like founders of Prylabs who built Prysm has worked on Prysm. It's basically, you know, a huge chunk of his life's work and basically going to probably be his legacy and the most impactful thing that he works on, you know, not to sell him short, but like, you know, a lot of the Ethereum core developers, I think, are aware that this work is like probably the most impactful they're going to do in terms of kind of like the biggest change, right? You only get to do the merge once, and you only get to do proof of stake on Ethereum once, right? And then kind of like keeping that going and kind of adding all those other upgrades. That's a legacy being built right there. So I think the fact that like Preston is saying that they're happy to see Prysm under 50% dominance because it's good for the overall network is just such an embodiment of like Ethereum values and kind of like Ethereum like ethos and mission. And whenever I see that, it just reaffirms my kind of like commitment and beliefs in Ethereum as an ecosystem. I've argued heaps of times before that Ethereum's social layer is very strong, and that is what keeps Ethereum such a cohesive ecosystem and allows us to do things like network upgrades, right? There is not really any contention around any of these network upgrades. Like EIP 1559, I think the only people that were against it in like a big way were miners, and that makes sense. But I talked about that back then, and I basically ran through how miners don't really have any kind of like power or anything like that. They kind of like just go along with what the rest of the ecosystem says. Then there's been some divisive things again around miners like prog power, but not really. Like all the upgrades, the majority of the community is behind, right? That roadmap that's been in place for a long time, the majority of the community sees the value in it and kind of like says, yes, let's do this sort of thing. And that includes obviously proof of stake, dank sharding or sharding in general and things like that, right? The roll-up centric roadmap, and the list goes on from there, right? So I just think whenever I see kind of like exchanges like this on Twitter or anywhere else, and I kind of like talk to people in the Ethereum ecosystem, I just come away feeling so inspired. I think that's probably the right word to use there, inspired. And I think that kind of like ethos and community attracts the best people that this ecosystem has to offer at the end of the day, and keeps them in the Ethereum community. Ethereum has a lot of hard problems to work on for these people as well. It's not like it's just a community thing. There's a lot of like intellectually interesting things to kind of like focus on too. So I don't know. I just thought this was a great kind of like tweet from Ali that kind of highlighted the fact that Ethereums really are built different. Not to say, I guess, like these people don't exist in other ecosystems, but I think Ethereum definitely has a monopoly on it. It has like the highest concentration of these sorts of people, and obviously Ethereum as an ecosystem is huge, so it's more impactful whenever these people do anything, right? But yeah, I thought that was awesome, because I kind of like sometimes was weary about telling people to not use Prysm, because I didn't want to kind of like shit on Prysm, so to speak. I didn't want to kind of like degrade Prylabs' work, but I think, obviously Prylabs completely understand that they're not just building to be a monopoly client. They're building as part of kind of like, they're building something that needs client diversity, right? Ethereum values client diversity. It's not just kind of like one client and kind of like done thing. And I don't think they would have kind of like built a client for kind of like the beacon chain if they thought that they were going to be the only one on there, right? And it's kind of like better and stronger together. These teams work so well together. I mean, they've all had to work together like very closely, especially around the merge, right? The merge isn't gonna happen without these teams working very closely together to make sure all their software talks to each other. It all works just fine without critical bugs, anything like that. Sometimes there has been a little bit of kind of like bickering between the teams here and there. You may have seen it before, but I mean, it's small kind of like things. It's not anything major, and it's not anything that would kind of like tear anything apart either. And I kind of like mentioned that cohesiveness of the community. I think the other side of the spectrum there is Bitcoin, where I guess like the core Bitcoin community seems to be cohesive around wanting to not change Bitcoin, right? And anyone who kind of like wants to change anything in Bitcoin is met with like fierce resistance. And that's just kind of like the different sides of the spectrum. And I think that's what turns me off Bitcoin a lot, is that like I don't really care for something to stay the same, and it's just so boring staying the same, and you can't even build anything on it. So yeah, I don't want to shit on Bitcoin, but like that's kind of like the way I view these things. All right, so Arbitrum announced yesterday that Arbitrum Odyssey will officially be going live mid-June. So you can kind of like, there's no thread or link to the blog post here. I thought they linked the blog post here, but there is a blog post somewhere describing what Arbitrum Odyssey is. I've talked about it before. Basically, I'm just scrolling down here trying to find it for you guys. I don't think I can get it right now, but basically, it's kind of like an NFT themed event, which you can kind of like earn NFTs for doing things on Arbitrum. From, if I remember correctly, I don't know if this is going to be a requirement or kind of like one of the things that they look at for the airdrop, but I'm sure a lot of you have already speculated on this and probably just going to do it anyway. It's probably worth doing anyway if you want to kind of like get airdrop farm. I'm sure a lot of you already thought of this, so it's probably preaching to the choir a little bit there. But just generally, I mean, look, Arbitrum Nitro is coming soon as well. Arbitrum is already in a kind of like an awesome platform to use. So I'm assuming a lot of you are already on there doing stuff on there and kind of having fun anyway. So this is just another thing for you to do on there. Earn some like cool NFTs. Potentially, this is kind of like one criteria they're going to look at for the eventual airdrop of the Arbitrum token, and anything like that. So I'm sure you guys are all over this already. You guys are pretty plugged into this sort of stuff. I always see it in the airdrop channel. Outside of MZY talking about how much he hates the hop airdrop in that channel all the time. You guys do definitely discuss this stuff, so I don't think I have to go into too much detail there, but just wanted to kind of highlight that it's going live mid-June, so definitely get ready for it. All right, so Binance has got a massive announcement today for Ethereum. They've enabled layer 2 ETH deposits for Optimism. So I don't think this is enabled just yet, but they've kind of like added the functionality, and they said they're going to enable it once their ETH kind of like wallets on Optimism gets full enough. But yeah, this is huge. I mean, Binance is obviously the world's biggest exchange, right? And them integrating more Ethereum layer 2s. I mean, they already have Arbitrum, now they have Optimism. Is awesome, right? It's really, really good. It's really good for onboarding. Again, Coinbase, where are you? Come on, guys. Like, don't let Binance eat your lunch, right? Come on, let's do it. Let's do it. I think they'll come eventually, Coinbase, as I've said before. But Binance already has Optimism and Arbitrum. I'm sure they're going to integrate other layer 2s. And as I said before, credit where it's due. I mean, I've been pretty harsh on Binance in the past because they have a competing ecosystem in Binance Smart Chain, but they seem to just be supporting L2s as well. So kudos to them for that. And if you're a Binance user, you can go use it. I mean, as I said, like, it's not enabled just yet, but it's going to be enabled soon. And you can use Binance to kind of like bridge in and out of Optimism. Now, the one thing I will kind of like knock Binance on, I think, from what I've noticed, is that the fees of withdrawing are generally higher than they are to do it through layer 1, which is a bit silly. I think sometimes they're just really slow to adjust their fees because obviously fees on Ethereum fluctuate on layer 1. I think they're just sometimes really, really slow to adjust that. But at the same time, and what I really find puzzling is that if they've got like a layer 2 Optimism wallet that they're crediting that ETH to, and it just sits on Optimism, but then they're not doing a layer 1 bridge, right, from layer 1 to layer 2. So shouldn't it cost basically the cost of a transfer on Optimism? So for example, right now, if I go to l2fees.info on my other screen here, to send ETH costs 17 cents. So why, I've seen Binance in the past charge like multiple dollars, like few dollars for Arbitrum withdrawals. Like, why are they doing that? And it seems like price gouging. Look, they don't have to charge like the minimum, right? But they could charge a little bit on top because obviously they want to make money from this. But like, charge like $1 if it's 17 cents. Like, obviously that's still like a huge profit margin, but like, don't charge like $5 or $10. Like, that just seems bizarre to me. So I think maybe because people are paying it, I guess, but I think it should always be less than the layer 1 cost, because then what's the point? I mean, you may as well just go to layer 1 Ethereum and bridge in from layer 1 Ethereum to layer 2 for the same cost, and you get better guarantees like that, right? I don't know. Binance has been doing this not just for layer 2s, but for layer 1s as well. Kind of like, I think that they just make too much money from withdrawal fees, so they'll probably just continue to do this, right? But still, cool to see them integrating Optimism here. Hopefully it's enabled soon. All right, so speaking of Optimism, they've kind of like put out a tweet thread today on a blog post, or I guess like a dev post, introducing Optimism Bedrock, which they're calling the cheapest, fastest, and most advanced rollup architecture ever. Now, you can read this Twitter thread for a summary on this, but Bobby here has the head of product at Optimism has a great kind of like TLDR. Basically, Optimism Bedrock includes better compression, which means cheaper transactions. It separates consensus and execution, which means it's ready for EIP 4844, which is proto-dank sharding. It has a teeny client diff, which is easier for new clients, better security plus extensibility when ZK. They're already teasing ZK stuff here, guys. It's pretty cool. And this will also make it easier for their kind of like client diversity to take off. Because as you guys know, I think I've mentioned it before, Optimism wants client diversity as well. They don't just want to have like one Optimism client. They want to have multiple ones like we have at the Ethereum layer 1. And then better P2P networking. So 50 times faster node sync, closer to sequencer decentralization. This is very exciting, right, guys? Like, this is some huge upgrades here coming with Bedrock. I mean, I think in the Twitter thread from memory, they said that after Bedrock goes live, they're going to be the cheapest roll-up on Ethereum, which is a pretty bold claim to make, but that's pretty cool, right? And the funny thing is, as I mentioned before, Arbitrum has Nitro coming as well. So both of the top optimistic roll-ups have massive upgrades coming very, very soon. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Bedrock and Nitro go live within weeks of each other, right? Just because of the fact that the competition is fierce right now between these two ecosystems. And the funny thing is that I think I would say that Arbitrum, I think, is still a little bit ahead in terms of ecosystem, but also obviously TVL, which, I mean, I don't really care for TVL too much these days, but it's still there. But in terms of kind of like Optimism making a comeback because they started later, they're definitely up there. But Optimism is going to beat Arbitrum to the punch with regards to a token. So that's going to change things as well. And then I just wonder like how far away Arbitrum is from responding with a token then. It just depends. Like I don't know, right? I don't know what these teams are thinking. You guys know that I'm investors in these teams, but as an angel investor, I don't ask for like any info. I don't get any info. Like I didn't know about the kind of like Optimism token until you guys did. So same kind of like thing there, but I think from kind of like that perspective, it's going to be the L2 kind of like competition is really going to heat up here, especially because these upgrades are so massive. Obviously, these teams want to make sure that people understand how big they are, want more people using their networks, want their networks growing, blah, blah, blah. Like, of course they do, right? And there is collaboration to be had here as well between the teams. But I think that the fact that, like, at the end of the day, like, the Optimism founders have been working on Optimism since, forever. Originally they were Plasma Group, and they've been working on scaling Ethereum forever. Arbitrum founders, same thing, right? They've been working on scaling Ethereum forever. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Arbitrum people were talking about but when they were off-chain labs, I should say, we're talking about this sort of stuff in 2014, right? So they've both been around for a long time. Of course, they're going to want to grow their own ecosystems, right? Like, yes, they kind of still contribute to the ecosystem at large, but they're all kind of like in it to grow their own ecosystem as much as possible because that's their kind of like life's work at this point, right? That's their legacy, and they want to make sure that it grows and thrives, which I mean, obviously we don't blame them for that, right? But this is going to be cool. But anyway, if you want to read kind of like all the details about Bedrock, I mean, you can read this Twitter thread here, but also read the post. I'll link both of these in the YouTube description. All right, so GameStop NFT kind of like put out a teaser kind of like tweet today again. For those of you who don't remember, GameStop is doing NFTs with both Loopring and Immutable X here. So basically they put out the kind of like an image that says, what the internet did for communication, blockchains do for value. Now global communities can connect, coordinate, and transact like never before. Public permissionless, credibly neutral value layers, power to the players. I like this signaling from GameStop here. Like, no matter what you think of NFTs, I like just people like GameStop, a big company signaling stuff like public permissionless, credibly neutral value layers, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that we always talk about within crypto, within kind of like Ethereum, is that permissionlessness, that credibly neutrality, and like Ethereum as a value layer. You don't really see anyone outside of it saying that, but for GameStop NFT to say this and look at the engagement on this tweet, right? 15,000 likes, it's really cool. It kind of like implants those ideas into people's minds, so when they hear them later, it's less of a kind of like, oh, is this an alien terminology to me, and more of like, oh, I've heard this before. GameStop said this sort of thing, right? So I love seeing that sort of stuff there, and just kind of like, I guess that's really it there. But that's like, I wanted to talk about it because of just that part of it. But I mean, I don't know what the timeline looks like for GameStop NFT or anything like that, but I'm sure it's coming sooner rather than later. As I said, working with both Loopring and Immutable X on this stuff. All right, finally here, Sandeep from Polygon shared that UniSwap V3 on Polygon is now doing $1.4 billion of weekly volume. This is huge, guys. Like I've mentioned UniSwap V3's growth on Polygon before, and just how fast it kind of like, I guess, cannibalized all the other AMMs on Polygon, which, I mean, for better or worse, right? I always like seeing competition, but UniSwap V3 is just so amazing. And some of you may be wondering, why hasn't anyone kind of like forked V3? That's because V3 has a license on it, a business license on it that basically says that unless you have the permission of Uniswap's kind of like DAO, you aren't able to deploy V3 on a chain, and you're not able to kind of like fork V3 either. There was a lot of controversy around this at the time when they released this license, but it seems to have worked as a defensive mechanism against other kind of like teams and ecosystems forking V3 like they did to V2. I'm not going to give a kind of like argument for or against that right now, but that's kind of like the logic behind it. And that's why I think V3 is able to cannibalize ecosystems, is because Uniswap V3 is a magical piece of kind of like a protocol, guys. Like, it really is. And I wouldn't say it's kind of like peak AMM design. There's probably a few improvements that can be made to it to make it even better. And I'm sure Uniswap V4 is going to come with those improvements. But V3 really is an amazing AMM design. So that's why they've been able to kind of like gather so much volume. And it's just great to see the Polygon POS chain ecosystem still kind of like, intact, still kind of like growing here, and hopefully some of that activity, or at least most of that activity, eventually migrates to the ZK solutions that Polygon has got coming out when they're released as well, which I think they will. It's much easier to get someone to move from the Polygon kind of like POS chain to a ZK than it would be from anywhere else, right? So cool to see this. Cool to see the growth from UniSwap here on Polygon. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone. Oh, not tomorrow, actually. Next week. It's Friday, right? Yay. Catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.